you're looking at data like you see here, you might want to know the sales, but you also might want to know the sales based on certain criteria. Like, what if you wanted to know the sales only for the state of New York? Well, here I can use the SUMIF function. Excel is going to suggest 3 different arguments, 2 mandatory arguments, and then 1 optional argument. Let's start by highlighting our sales numbers here, and then I'm going to hit comma to move to my next argument, which is the criteria. And let's say that I want the sum of all of my sales, but only if they're greater than 400,000. To use comparison operators like greater than, less than, greater than or equal to, less than or equal to, or equal to, you need to put those in quotations. So I'm going to open quotes, and then I'm going to say greater than and type the number 400,000. I'm going to close my quotes, close my parentheses, and hit enter. And now Excel is going to give me the sum of my sales numbers that are greater than 400,000. And if I go in and I create a sum manually, so I'll say sum of that 600, I'm going to skip the 385, add 520, go down, add 933, and then I'll skip the 303. You'll see that I get the same value as I have below in G8. So if it works like that, then what's the third argument for? Well, this works if the criteria is based on the value of the numbers in this range. But what if you want your criteria to be the state? In that case, my range actually needs to be the states that I have over here in column D. And then I'm going to change my criteria to, in quotes, NY, because that's text. Now if I just hit enter, it's going to give me 0 because it's summing the values in column D. And obviously there are no numerical values there. What I need is a sum range, so I'm going to hit comma. I'm going to move into my third argument, hit F2 to move into enter mode, and then highlight my sales range. So when I hit enter, it's giving me the sales only for New York. I can copy that up here by only selecting the New York lines, and it's going to give me the same value. And if you look at how that works here, it's SUMIF. I'm taking the range that I'm looking for my criteria, those states, I'm giving it the criteria is New York, and then I'm giving it the sum range, the values, and Excel knows it wants to sum the values that correspond with the same row. So if it says NY in my first column, it's going to add the sales number in my second column. Now, SUMIF is good if you're only using one criteria and you only need 3 arguments, but it's possible that you might want to look at multiple criteria. For example, if you wanted to take the sum of the sales in New York, but only if your salesperson has more than 2 years of experience, you can use the SUMIFs function. And this allows you to have multiple criteria and not just one. And personally, I actually prefer to use SUMIFs even if I only have one criteria because I think the syntax is just a little bit easier to understand. And if you watch this, I think you'll see what I mean. I start with my sum range, and now I like that because I'm choosing the values that I want to sum based on the criteria. So then I hit comma, and now I'm moving into my criteria. I specify the criteria range for my first criteria. So let's say my first criteria is which state we're in. So I'm going to grab the range of states, comma, define the value that I'm looking for. My criteria is New York. And then I'm going to hit another comma, and I'm going to move into these optional arguments. So I can arrow over to my experience. I'm going to define the range that I'm looking at of years of experience, comma, and I'm going to define my criteria as greater than 2 years of experience. Then I'm going to close a parentheses and hit enter. And if I adjust that column width, you'll see that I'm getting 1.1 million. So let's double check that that's true. I want the sum of, let's see Alice. She's in New York and she has 4 years of experience, so she's good. Ben is in New York, but he only has 1 year of experience, so we're going to skip him. And then Caroline is the last one in New York, and she has 3 years of experience. So we're going to add her. And you'll see that you get the same value here as you did down in cell H8. Sum is not the only function that uses criteria. You also have the COUNTIF function that works in a very similar way. I'll highlight the range. So let's say I want to count the number of salespeople in New York. And then my criteria in the very similar way is just in quotes, NY. And then I hit enter and it tells me I have 3 salespeople in New York. Or I can do the same thing as above. I can say equals COUNTIFs for multiple criteria. I specify my first criteria range, which is my state. And then I define what I'm looking for, New York, criteria range 2, my years of experience. And my criteria is greater than 2. And it tells me that I have 2 salespeople that meet both of those criteria. Count A does not have that built-in conditional logic, but average does. I could say average if. And this looks more like my sum function, where I need to specify my range, and then my criteria, and then my average range, just like my sum range, the actual numbers that I'm averaging. And I can use average ifs. And I'm going to start with my average range, move on to my criteria range 1, specify my criteria 1, criteria range 2, specify my second criteria, and then it'll give me the average of that. You can actually do the same thing with max and min. You can take the max based on certain criteria, and this can be very valuable when you're performing data analysis on a large data set and you want to know, for example, what's the largest number that meets these certain criteria, or what's the smallest number that meets these certain criteria. So here I could say, what is the max ifs? What's the max? And I want the max range of, let's just say, I want all of my salespeople in New York. I don't have to specify more arguments. If I only have one criteria that I want to meet, I can just hit enter there, and it'll tell me that my top salesperson in New York is Alice right here. And you can do the same thing with your men, but I think you get the idea, so we don't need to walk through that. Finally, I'm going to highlight my last secret cells, and I'm going to tell you about a function that a lot of people do not know about, which can become really useful when you combine it with other functions, and that is the large and the small function. So the way this works is I'm going to type equals large, open parentheses. And what this function does, you'll see right here in the description below my cell, it returns the largest value in the data set. For example, I can specify the 5th largest number, and it uses k as an indicator for the rank of the number that you're trying to find. So to explain that a little bit better, first I'm going to get my array right here. So I'm telling Excel the range of numbers to look through, and then I specify k, which is the rank that I want. If I type 1 and then enter, it's going to give me the number 1 salesperson, or in this case, I have the number 1 to the left. So I could just make that a reference to the number 1, and it'll give me the number 1 salesperson. Or I could change that here to 2. It'll give me the number 2 salesperson. Or 4, it'll give me the number 4 salesperson. If you want to look at this from the other direction, starting at the small end, you type small, and it works in exactly the same way. So now I'm going to get the number 1 smallest sales. I could change that to the number 2 smallest sales, number 3, and so on. I'm going to change this back to large, and now we're going to fill this down to demonstrate a problem. I'm starting with my range of sales from F3 down to F7, and I'm taking the number 1 largest salesperson. Now I'm moving down, and what I want is the number 2 largest salesperson. I've copied my formula and I've moved it down. And I know that my number 2 salesperson should be the 610 Alice up here. So why is it still showing me 933 is my number 2? If you hit F2, you'll see the problem. When I copied my formula down, it moved from number 1 in E14 to number 2 in E15. That's what I wanted. But it also moved the range of cells that I'm looking at. My range of F3 to F7 has shifted down 1 cell from F4 to F8. Now I'm including that sum value in the range of numbers that Excel is looking at. So now the second largest number is that 933 for this range. The solution to this problem is cell anchoring.